I'm not going to go on with this really, because this guy wrote this book recently, and he's done a lot of research for it, okay? And that's why I brought it up there. Then we come to seems that fearing defeat, the British initiated a policy of mass killings. Okay? Calculating backwards, I reached the first approximate figure of 10 million. That's in India. If it happened in India, what happened wherever else the colonial powers were? Let's take an example. In Egypt, Dunlop changed the educational system. Arabic, pushed down. Arabic learning is pushed down. English learning is pushed up. People are educated to be clerks and employed by the British government, by the British rulers, and given pensions on higher salaries than the people who know Arabic. Their children go to English schools up to a certain level, and then they go to England for further studies. All this is separating the religion from the individual. They're not learning their religion. What's happening today? A continuation. You're not learning religion here. This is how disastrous it's been for Muslims. And it's all over. In India, they took away the waqf, the support for the educational systems, the land, which was producing the revenue. And when they cut that off, all the madrasas were closed, the schools were closed, the institutions were closed because they had no support to keep going. The educational system. They did it in Libya. And I'm almost certain that they would have done it in most African states. And probably Malaysia too. They changed the language, for instance. Then we come to the breakup of the Fertile Crescent, the Ottoman Empire. After World War I, West was dominant. The French were in northwest and equatorial Africa, as well as the Levant, Lebanon and Syria. The British were in Egypt, Palestine, Transjordan, Iraq, the Arabian Gulf, Indian subcontinent, Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Singapore and Brunei. The Dutch were in Indonesia. In 1882, Prime Minister Gladstone stood before Parliament with a copy of the Quran in his hand, and he said, "As long as this book remains in the hands of the Egyptians, we will never establish a foundation in that country." The Spaniards sold Philippines to the US at the turn of the 20th century. Muslim retained power in Iran and Turkey. All this is from the Islamic threat by John Esposito. But he doesn't mention these next two. The Chinese were in East Turkmenistan, and Russia was in the Central Asian republics. In 1917, the Tsar was overthrown, and in 1922, the last Emir of Bukhara had to flee to Afghanistan when the communists came. I was in Bukhara, well, Uzbekistan is Bukhara and Samarkand, just as the ex-USSR was breaking up in 1991. Okay? And I talked to some people about it, and I talked to some Muslims. Now, the colonial encounter was coloured by racism, prejudice, bias. Mainly the contact was through seamen, soldiers or students. Seamen established the first Muslim communities in seaports in this country: Cardiff, Liverpool, Glasgow and London. By the 20th century, several hundred peddlers ventured to the remote areas of Scotland with their wares and medicines. After these came waves of political refugees from former colonies. From the West Indies, in response to Winston Churchill's appeal to help to rebuild in Britain after World War II, the subcontinent of India, from Africa and Europe. So, we've seen historically the presence of Muslims and there being some awareness of Islam in the UK. Not all bad. So a brief look at Muslims in the 19th and 20th century. And now the question comes, what's stopping us living together today? Well, what are the issues facing us? Citizenship? Not an issue for me. I have a British passport. I have a contract with the government. I will abide by the rules and regulations of this country. We're told, Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, told us to honour our treaties with non-Muslims as well as Muslims. Integration. I've got a little article which I've written, Why I Can't Integrate. And essentially, it's because at some stage or other, I will stand out as the other. Whether it's prayer time like Maghrib, which is a short time, and I have to pray at that time, I will get up and pray. Whether it's dietary, other people have dietary restrictions, I will have a time. In Ramadan, I will fast. Okay? And so on. So at some stage, I will always stand out and be different. So I cannot integrate. And when I spoke in Middlesbrough, the mayor said to me, I understand where you're coming from. In Middlesbrough and Stockton, we have roads for Catholics and Protestants. In other words, the Catholics and Protestants can't integrate, and they're all Christians. Why are they asking the impossibility of us? I only want to be accepted. And then people say, but you want us to accept everything you accept. Not at all. Not at all. Shari'ah is for Muslims. We have a suspicion and distrust by the majority. What are we doing to alleviate this? Obviously not enough. But there are Muslims running Islamic information stalls in most market towns today. People can get information easily about Islam. You can go on the internet and get all sorts of information about Islam, even from non-Muslims. How do you know what's right? And how do you know what's wrong? You have lectures being given, interfaith discussions. But then I heard from a fellow in interfaith, quite high up, he went with the Bishop of Leicester to a place in a seminary in Northampton to speak on Islam, and all the students he was talking to thought Islam was a pagan religion. But if we're having certain things taught in Muslim schools, where is pagan religion for Islam being taught in this country? I tried to show you right from the beginning that we all believe in the same God. How can Islam be a pagan religion? And how is it being taught, and why is it allowed to be taught? Isn't it teaching prejudice? There's also fear on part of the sections of the host community. These people seem to have lost sight of the fact that Muslims are also present in their societies, also targeted. 9/11, and where this mosque is being, well, I say mosque, Islamic Centre is supposed to be being built in New York on Ground Zero or somewhere around Ground Zero. Aren't they aware that there were a lot of Muslims killed at that place as well? Very few Jews. There's a holiday for them. Mass media demonizes Muslims. I wrote to the Press Commission when the war in Yugoslavia was on, and I said, why is it that it's Serbs, Croats and Muslims in the paper? Why not Serbs, Croats and Slavs? Or Christians, Orthodox and Muslims? But this is bias. They said, no, these are the terms which are understood by people because the press has been using them. But isn't there a difference between Serbs, Croats and Muslims in terms of describing the people? Politicians want to change Islam. Lord Macaulay was the person who changed the educational system in India, and Dunlop was the person who changed it in Egypt. And in doing so, when they sent these people abroad for higher education and they came back, these people became the civic leaders, the military rulers and the politicians. And this was the elite that was put at the top of the country on top of the people who wanted to practice their religion. And this is what the colonial powers did. And that's why the people down below are trying to practice the religion and the people at the top are not interested in general. And you look at any Muslim country, that was under colonial power, and you see what happened. Should I talk about Ataturk, how he abolished the madrasas, how he changed the religion, how he forced the Grand Mufti to flee to Egypt? How many other countries had similar? What about General Suharto? When I mentioned Bukhara, when they closed all the mosques in Samarkand was the seat of learning. 450 mosques, and each mosque had a madrasa associated with it, and each of those madrasas, or schools, educational facilities, taught not only the natural sciences, but medical science as well. They were like universities, and they closed all of them. The only place they kept open was in Bukhara, and that was to train imams and muezzins for the whole of the USSR. Now, politicians want to change Islam. People want to tell us what Islam is and what we can practice and what we can't practice. Now, the Home Office commissioned Lancaster University to produce a report based on Muslims are a problem. So they looked into it. Lancaster University study findings angered Muslim groups because they did not, their findings did not agree with what they were asked to look into. I'll show you why. Ministers were accused of cynicism over integration. Well, I've shown you what that means, and I believe it. It is cynicism. It's an impossibility. This is 2006 from the Guardian. They found many findings to challenge Muslims are a problem. That was the assumption. 1/3 of white students believed one race was superior to another. 1/3 of white students. They went to 3 different types of schools. One completely white, one mixed, and one predominantly Muslim. 1/10 of students in Muslim schools believed one race was superior. Less than 1/5 at mixed schools believed one race was superior. So the white are racist, more so than Muslims. That would be the finding. A quarter said there was no need to show tolerance to those with different views. It might be reasonable to suggest it is the Asian Muslim students in both the mixed and multicultural schools of Burnley and Blackburn who are in fact the most tolerant of all. The study concluded, the government study dealt a blow to claims by British ministers that Muslims were less willing to integrate into society. The government doesn't want to know that. The study does fly in the face of what ministers have been saying. British Muslim leaders have blamed the government for fueling anti-Muslim campaigns in the country. It was shocking that the government ignored its own findings and then cynically helped to unleash a public anti-Muslim backlash that has included the vilification of Muslim schools and Muslim rights to practice their religion. This is the outcome of this type of report. But how many people know about it? This is not what gets on Panorama. Misconception. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessing be upon him, wrote the Quran. First, he was unlettered. He was known never to have told a lie. The Quraysh trusted the people of Mecca and trusted their valuables with him. Even to the extent that when they went to kill him, he had Ali, his cousin, his nephew, sleep in his bed to return the valuables to their rightful owners when he himself had departed from Medina. And there are many things in the Quran that he would not have known. Was it poetry?